that's not going to get resolved. And I would guess that it would be about 2 years before MSBA gave us a green light for a project to deal with what we need. 2 years plus a firm commitment, and plus the fact that we would be over the hump on some of the Prop 2.5, the extra funding right now. The overrides have already been approved. I don't know if the town would approve it in that year or not. You never know. I know what the needs are. I know that we're living in borrowed time with the septic system. If it lasts 3 years, I'll be thrilled.
I'm surprised.
Yeah. We're pumping it.
As needed, but as many as 4 times a year.
Yeah, just to keep it functioning. This is something in danger of failure every year. Whichever secondary school goes first, I'm sure will have a septic treatment solution that serves both buildings. That doesn't concern me. The priority of the 2 secondaries for that purpose. One of the things that we discovered after the failed override this spring was that many people didn't realize how severe conditions were. I think whatever questions there are about the credibility of the school committee will be alleviated by the fact that MSBA has been as thoroughly involved as they will be. And I think this is still a community that very much supports education. So I think we can make it. I think we'll go.
Go ahead.
The premise that the state would look on us of not supporting education but supporting tax relief by going for the batch, I'm not sure I agree with that. We're in a situation where you can only afford to do so much. We need some improvements to the schools for sure. Getting some relief on debt that we already have and getting that off the books gives us some more capacity to do something in the future. So I think that you got to look at the a longer term picture of this than just the immediate need. I mean, I think that going for the batch and relieving some of that tax burden has an advantage to then giving us some capability to do something down the road. So I wouldn't necessarily agree that we would be looked on as not supporting education by doing that.
You want to respond to that?
Well, I can sympathize with those arguments from an internal point of view. I'm just trying to put on a hat as somebody sitting on that board. If I were sitting there, how would I look at it? Would I really believe that I had to fund the batch in order to have credibility as a state agency? Would I believe that that small help to the tax rate was more important than 30–40% on a high school?
I don't think you're saying it's more important. I just think you're putting things into more of a timeline. That there are only so many things that you can do. And we know from our experience last election that an override couldn't be passed. I think just getting some relief gets us in a better position.
Abby?
I think it's probably a dubious exercise to try and second guess what the SBA is going to do. You could equally say that here is a newly formed commission that is probably in over departments have to some degree. And the idea that they could pay for a new school, it's not gonna cost them nearly as much as the school that's currently being requested by some other community, and not have to worry about the ongoing engineering and this and that, it's done. It's a big bang for their buck. Is equally valid as an argument when you try and figure out what the SBA is gonna do.
What I've heard tonight, and I'm going to try to summarize it, I've heard some very good cases for the batch, and I've also heard an equal number of good reasons to go for the high school or as a priority, or the middle school as a priority. And I think what's missing here is what we just talked about a little while ago, and that is the fact that the letter raises some questions that maybe we could get some answers to, which would help the superintendent and the school committee make the final decision that they have to make. So perhaps what we should do is pursue through Representative Jones and maybe call the office directly and see if we can arrange a meeting before the 15th. And, another approach, if we can't get answers, might be to say, look, state, we heard your letter, but our priorities are these two, right? There is no 1, 2, 3, number one priority. This is our number one priority, and list both things, and take it from there. Anyone else? We haven't heard from anyone in the that's not on the finance committee or school committee. Anybody in the audience want to comment before we close this discussion? Mr. Carucci. I don't see anyone else raising their hands. Oh, I'm sorry.
Quick. Our statement of interest is going in. What we want to do, all right, is in there. The state is still going to step in. It's going to step in and tell you whether that project is feasible. They may come back to us and say, you don't need a high school, you don't need that built that way. They want to be hands-on with this. They don't want towns running wild the way we did before. So, to me, we've got to get lined up and set everything in. We go from there. That's the way I look at it.
Mr. O'Leary.
Again, looking at the timelines, and we're talking about 2 years out before we get any type of approval and moving forward and commitment, dollar amounts here. I mean, they're going to have annual appropriations towards these projects. To me, we have to look forward rather than backwards. Major priorities and things that we have to address on the secondary school level. Bottom line, that's our first priority as far as what needs to be addressed. On the bachelor, in relation to the bachelor school, we sold that project to the community with no expectation of reimbursement. And if we would pursue all avenues in order to try and get some reimbursement. And the community bought in because they were looking at the physical plant itself. It was obvious that there was a need. So to me, we have to look forward. We have to plan ahead. We have to look 2 years down the road. If we prioritize the bachelor school project as a single one that they're asking for here, I mean, you can say, you're asking for one, but we're going to give you two. But they're still going to say, give us one. I think we need to pursue the bachelor school separately, as was suggested, and move forward, look forward, and go with the secondary school level. And from a timing standpoint, if we put these other projects on the back burner, in their eyes, because we prioritized bachelor school, it puts us further behind the 8 ball from a cost standpoint and from meeting those needs. So I think we just have to look forward, move forward, prioritize those projects that need to be addressed, which is the secondary school level, and simultaneously pursue reimbursement, which I think we're entitled to from the state for the bachelor school project.
Mr. Benny.
Yeah, the only thing is, some of this is revisionist history, because I don't believe if you poll people that they remembered that election as being, they knew up front they weren't going to get reimbursed. Perhaps what you said at the end, where you talked about how every effort was going to be made to seek reimbursement. I think that's what people remember most, okay? Which is not quite the same as they knew they weren't going to get reimbursement. But
There was no expectation.
But be that as it may, okay, I think that your view on this, that seeking reimbursement for the badge is not supporting the school is outrageous, quite frankly, outrageous, okay? It is, by seeking reimbursement for that school, you're telling the voters, you're telling the people of this town, you're affecting the tax rate, you're allowing the people to be, maybe, to vote to approve a project down the road. You're setting up saying we're working with the community for the best interest of the community, for what purpose? To benefit the schools, okay? You know, you say you don't know what works. You don't know what works. Well, you know what you've done before, and it didn't work. You just did it. It didn't work. We just did it. It didn't work. So you need to try something else, okay? So to my way of thinking, now I'm scared about it too, just like you are. I'm scared. I'm scared that if we say we want the badge, right, that they'll say, okay, you get nothing. Yeah, that's the fear. I hear you. I hear you. So I'm not saying that I don't understand what you're saying and agree with it in part, okay? But the badge is either done now or it's dead. That's the way I see it. It's either done now or it's dead. And I think if you do it now, when 2 years from now, when you got to go to the community and say, we need $2 million to fund our schools, they're going to say, hey, these are the people that got us $16 million back. Okay, and maybe, do I know that? I don't know that, but maybe. Okay, and I do know that what we just did, didn't work. I do know that much. So that's my read on it. I hear you though. I don't, you know, if you go with the middle school, we all go with the middle school in the batch. I'm not saying that's wrong. I am saying though, suggesting that the batch is not supporting school is outrageous and shameful. Shameful to say. Nobody supports schools more than me. Nobody. And this community supports schools more than me.
I don't see any correlation between what happened this spring and the National School. Okay, they're two separate issues. Looking for an override for general operating expenses is far different than looking for an override for a capital project for brick and mortar. And we've found over the years we've been far more successful going for the brick and mortar than we have been for a general operating expense. And that's what we're talking about, right? Brick and mortar. And there's no correlation between the property tax relief that you're going to get, possibly, on a back-to-the-school reimbursement and assisting you in your general operating expenses. Because it does cut down what you did for the override, you know, for that specific project. It has nothing to do with your operating project.
No, it doesn't, but you know, keep in mind that the taxpayers have not yet received the full impact of the batch of the school, so.
Or the police station.
Mr. Chairman, just one quick point. I do know that we did say we would pursue every every opportunity that we could to get reimbursed for the batch. I will also say, however, that the state told us you likely will never receive reimbursement, proceed at your own risk, because there's no program for you to apply to. If you build a building, you approve a building right now, it's very unlikely you'll ever see a penny from the state. So we are pursuing those opportunities, but the state was pretty clear, proceed at your own risk, which we did because we had to.
Abby?
Yeah, just briefly, well, I think the sentiment of having schools such as the Batch and Bedford considered separately might be nice. Bottom line is that's not on the table. The state has known about these situations and is not responding. So I don't think you can look at it that way. The Finance Committee has discussed this prior. We did not have a copy of this letter, nor did we hear Dr. Troden's speech this evening prior to our discussion. But we did discuss the issue, and our feeling was that the Batch should be the #1 school for a variety of reasons, but mostly because over the next year or so, hopefully the town can be in better shape and have more capacity to get involved in various projects that need to happen. I think that our recommendation would be to Dr. Troden that it be a very carefully worded letter that suggests the bachelor is #1, but it's very clear that because this is a hybrid and it's not acceptable, what #2 is. And I think that that needs a number of evils, for lack of a better term. I also would ask what happens. I mean, we're basically talking about no building that you're going to be able to walk into for at least 6 years. What happens if after 2 years you then go spend some time and go to the population and ask for an override, and it fails? You know, where does that place you on the SBA's list? Off. So this way, at least we know we have